was in preschool, and there is documented evidence to this, I rode the small bus to school. I had a very heavy speech impediment when I was a kid. I had a very thick tongue. So I still have a little slight lisp now, if, you could hear it upon close inspection. But when I was a kid, you really couldn't understand what I was saying. And because of this, the schools thought I was mentally challenged. So when I was in preschool, I was in these special needs classes. So this little bus would come pick me up every single day, and it was filled with all other mentally challenged kids. So one kid in particular, his name was Teddy. And I'll never forget Teddy, because every single day, without fail, Teddy would shit his pants in the school bus. So he had overalls on, and I would be sitting next to him. I would sit on in the seat by the window, because I would sit there first, and then he would sit next to me, and then he would see me. He'd go, "Hey, Brent," and then he would just start shitting in his overalls. He'd go, "Eh!" And he would just make deer pellets in his pants. And what he would do is he would unbuckle his overalls and then just dump them out on the seat next to me. So every day right before class started, I had to literally crawl over this kid's shit and then just go to class. But it was so normal, and it was just like, that was just life back then. And I just rode the bus to school in the mentally challenged bus, and I literally had to crawl over shit. And that was like that for a couple of years. Or not in a couple of years, but I would say maybe a couple of months. And then they realized that I wasn't really fitting that criteria for the mentally challenged camp. So they put me in regular kindergarten instead. So that's how my youth started out. This is Coffee and Catastrophe with Brent and Gabi.
That is, you've told me that story a couple times, and every time I have such a hard time controlling myself from laughing. It's so bad and so funny.
I thought this is what school was. I thought you could just shit on the bus.
No, Teddy was wrong. You can't just shit yourself. I don't have an experience like that just the whole thing rocked my world. I really loved school as a kid, and I never had that experience.
The whole bus was filled with characters, and then the bus would pick up the kids at their individual homes. So I was one of the first kids. Actually, I would say maybe third or fourth kids, but even still part of the first group. A little bus, so maybe the bus held no more than 20 kids at a time. So they picked up me, they picked up Teddy. Teddy would sit next to me, he'd shit himself, and then we would pick up Ben, who lived in the apartments in more of the, at the time, underdeveloped part of Round Lake. And every single day, Ben would fight the school bus.
He would fight the school bus?
Yeah, he would actually come outside with a boomerang, and he would just take this boomerang and go, "Ah!" and they just start hitting it from the side. And his mom just let him beat up the school bus. He probably thought it was the bonus stage from Street Fighter 2 or something. But every day, just, "Ah!" and he would come out with he had Band-Aids on his head. And he would just beat himself up by fighting the bus. And we just, after he got done fighting the bus, he got on there and he was fine. I guess he just needed to get it out of him. And then there was a little Jacqueline who would have severe temper tantrums. She had Down syndrome. And she had the classic symptoms, and she even had the appearance. Mm-hmm. So she would be totally fine one moment, and then she would turn into the Hulk and then just start throwing stuff.
Oh my god.
Just flipping desks and everything. So Teddy was nice, but every day the same thing. "Hi, Brent." And then there'd just be they were I just remember they were so dry.
Ew.
It looked like he was eating grass.
Ew.
And he would just empty this out onto the bus. And I don't remember him having a change of clothes in the school either.
You'd think that they know it was a pattern and provide that kid some clothes. Jeez.
He had his morning dump on the bus every day, and I'm staring out the window.
Oh my god.
I'm not really introverted or contemplating, life at that time. I was just being 6 years old, or however old I was, 5 or 6, and that was just my everyday life. I was in the special needs class, and I have proof. I have pictures. I have the bus. I have even a class photo of all the other, crazy ass kids I was with. And yeah, I know it's really challenging to have a child with that. And I was in the bus, and they were all completely nuts. I think Ben, he was the craziest one, only because he would think he would fight the bus. Every day, he just beat the living shit out of the bus. Even in the wintertime, he'd be out there slipping in the snow, like trying to kick the bus's ass.
Well, let's not call intellectually disabled children crazy, but you have some very interesting experiences for being on this bus and in this class.
I don't even think Ben was intellectually disabled. He just wanted to fight the bus.
He just wanted to fight the bus. He just wanted
to I think he's fine now. He just had to.
But here's the question: did he ever beat the bus?
I don't. I'll tell you this: I haven't seen the bus since.
I think we can safely assume he beat the bus.
But he had a boomerang, like a hand-carved wooden boomerang that maybe his dad got him or something.
He wouldn't throw it. He would hit the bus with it, like run up to it and hit it with it.
Yeah, like it was a bat, and he would just like these weird-ass primal kid screams.
Oh, that reminds me. Do you remember that show Recess?
Yes, that was one of my favorite shows.
Where the kindergartners were like tribal, like they had like face paint and didn't wear any clothes and leaves, and they were just like crazy. That's all I think of when I think of like kindergarten or like being young. I didn't like Recess growing up. My favorite TV shows were like, I was like Nickelodeon kid, like Angry Beavers, Rugrats, Ah Real Monsters, anything on Nickelodeon. And we didn't have Disney Channel till I was like probably like in preteens. Like we never had that. So or Cartoon Network either. We didn't have Cartoon Network till I was like 12 or 13. So like kids would be talking about stuff. That being said, I used to rent from Blockbuster episodes of Powerpuff Girls. And that was awesome. And I also tried to rent episodes of Sailor Moon, but my mom really curbed how much I could watch Sailor Moon because she said it was witchcraft and that she didn't want me watching it. That being said, my mother, like one of the first books we read as like when I was old enough to like read on my own, and my parents could enjoy like story time with me beyond like just picture books, was Harry Potter. So I don't know why my mom didn't like Sailor Moon and this bullshit witchcraft argument, but there we have it.
I remember one of our friends growing up, his mom, like, are you familiar with Pokemon cards at all?
Yeah, but I mean, like, I got into them on a very, like, superficial level. Like, I liked aesthetically, like, how things, like, how certain Pokemon looked, but I wasn't, like, obsessed with, like, building my deck and learning how to play.
Gotcha. This mother was so adamant about her son being exposed to evil stuff that she made him throw away the psychic Pokemon cards and the psychic energies. And I'm not sure if you remember, but I think they're still the same now. But the psychic energy was purple, and it was a little circle, and it had a little sketch or etching of an eye.
Yes, I remember that.
And she thought that was the devil. So literally, this kid would be pulling out like holographic Mewtwo's from packs, and he'd have to just throw them away because they were all the devil.
They were all the devil.
All the devil, dude.
I did have a friend growing up as well who her parents wouldn't let her read Harry Potter or do anything like that because it was witchcraft. But they were like legit about it. Like I don't think she ever played Pokemon, but they were very, very careful about like what she was able to like read and listen to. She was really, I hate using that word sheltered, but like, yeah, I don't know. Did you have a sheltered childhood? I know the answer is no, because you've talked about how you were raised by Def Comedy Jam at the age of, 7?
Yeah, the funny thing about that is my mom was adamant about barring me from Beavis and Butthead. I remember when Beavis and Butthead Do America came out, I really wanted to see that movie with my brother, and he was a teenager by then, so he could see it without my mom being there, and I wanted to see it so bad, and instead she took me to 101 Dalmatians, and then like when I went home, I would go and watch, I think his name was Hamburger on Def Comedy Jam, and be like, yo, you make the pussy taste good, hamburger.
Ew.
Like next time and like he's just saying like all these words, and my parents are totally fine with it, but Beavis and Butthead was too much. I think it was because at the time Beavis and Butthead was the most controversial show. It was rotting the brains of American kids. Like it would have turned me into just a complete degenerate who did drugs, even at the age of 7 or however old I was. But now that show is so tame compared to some of the other stuff that you see now.
The couple shows I recall I wasn't allowed to watch were Power Rangers because it was too violent. Although I think eventually I was able to watch some Power Rangers because there were so many iterations of Power Rangers, right? And I wasn't allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy because Ren and Stimpy was like creepy and weird, and I couldn't watch that. But other than that, like I was really like into like Disney movies growing up. Like my favorite was like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Like fucking love Beauty and the Beast. Fucking love Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules. Fucking hysterical. Like I really like, we had those on like VHS and we would like watch them. Like my mom to this day I think has memorized like the start time of Lion King because you had to fast forward through all the previews and whatnot. She has like memorized like what the timestamp is because I would just like watch that on a loop.
My jam growing up was the giant monster movies. So, for instance, it's still one of my top 10 all-time favorite movies. It's the original King Kong.
I've never seen it.
Oh, God, dude, that thing, like, especially like as an adult now, like watching back on it, the amount of time and effort they put into making those scenes, like with the stop motion, like robotic effects. And I think in Peter Jackson's King Kong, there was a lost scene where there was a scene where they were fighting a spider in the cave. So they tried to recreate it. They tried to recreate it using the same technology, and it took them such a long time to just do that one scene. But I think his name is Ray Harryhausen. He did all those special effects for King Kong, Clash of the Titans, pretty much like anything that was claymation, stop motion, Jason and the Argonauts with the battle scenes, and he did it so well. And I was so fascinated by like the giant monsters, especially dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And on Laserdisc, what would shut me up as a kid was my mom would put on Laserdisc the fight scene between Kong and the T-Rex. Mm-hmm. Just that scene. And then I even learned at a point to where I can just rewind to that scene just to go back, and I would watch it on repeat for hours and hours and hours, just completely fascinated by dinosaurs. I loved Godzilla too. And all these like other like Gamera, I know he's really cult now, but that big turtle that can like fly with jetpacks, and then
I have no idea what Gamera is.
I watched all those, like even like these really crap, like Gulala, I think was the name of one. There was a video store called Walton's Video by my place. There was a restaurant, or not a restaurant, but a grocery store called Pick and Save, and they had Walton's Video attached, and they had all those monster movies. I was just completely obsessed with them, and I still try to keep up now, but it's a dead genre. There's really not as much as there used to be. Now it's the PG-13 psychological horror.
Yeah. Or like the paranormal stuff, like Paranormal Activity hasn't had a lot of iterations, but like all like the possession movies and like demons infiltrating, like Insidious and stuff like that. That's really big now. That was another, flashback to Blockbuster. There was the one section of Blockbuster that was like horror movies. I would walk and like look at the ground. I like couldn't look at like the covers of the movies. It freaked me out too much.
I was the very same. There was a video store. The name, I can't remember the name of the movie, and I called it Knife Toothbrush because on the cover of the art, like the box artwork was like a hand drawn. I still don't know what the name of it was. I haven't found it to this day, but it was a guy. It was a picture of a toothbrush that's a little bit canted. And there was a guy that looked like he was being impaled by it, and he just had his like a bloody chest, and there was blood going down the bristles. And I just called the movie Knife Toothbrush, and it scared the living crap out of me.
Oh yeah, Leprechaun scared the shit out of me. That cover, it's just creepy. And they're like B horror movies. They're not that good, but like the artwork of them just like terrified me. I also distinctly remember the smell of Blockbuster. Like it's this weird, pungent fake popcorn, but not hits you right in your nostrils, like disgustingness. Blockbuster. I just realized also the other day, Netflix, remember they started out like sending you DVDs.
Yeah.
They don't even do that anymore. Everything's streaming now, isn't it?
I think so. I'm not too sure because there was a few indie movies, like very obscure movies, that I could not access or even rent without Netflix delivering it to my house.
No, for sure.
But I think, it's probably streaming only now. I haven't really kept up with it at all. I'm mooching off of somebody else's account, so that's why I can't really.
It doesn't everybody, I just I felt like an adult the other day when I bought a subscription to Spotify Premium. I was like, okay, this is some adult shit now. I'm gonna pay the $10 a month to allow myself to play whatever song I want whenever I want. I'll probably get rid of it within the next 3 months though.
But within that 3 months, there will be at least 55 people with your account information mooching off of your Spotify account.
I hope not.
I think, people say Netflix makes millions of dollars. I think they only make $10 a month, and everyone else is just mooching off of that one person's account.
Exactly. I don't think, honestly, though, they are probably making mad money because of the fact that they're able to come out with all these new series and movies and docuseries, you name it, they come out with it and they make fucking bank, I'm sure. Back onto childhood and stuff. We were talking about this episode, what it was going to be about, and I really like talking about childhood and stuff. But in thinking about the things that influenced us and shaped you, was there ever a moment when you realized that you were maturing, or what are the things that you look back on that you think formed you into the person you are today?
Tragedy. I would say tragedy. Most of the times, I in a way, I grew up really, really fast. When I was a kid, my mom she was diagnosed with blood clots in her legs and her lungs. Ugh. So I was in the hospital room, and I was there when the priest read her last rites.
Oh my God.
She read the passage, and it was weird because I wasn't crying and I wasn't sad, but my dad was a complete mess, and understandably so. But I was about 9 years old. There were a few times where I collapsed just crying because I remember I was watching John Leguizamo with my mom, one of his stand-up specials, and she said her leg was just killing her and it was hurting her so much. And then I can't remember who did it, but we called 911 and they took her to the hospital. They just rushed her to the hospital, and my dad went with her, and then my brother was just watching me. And I would remember the exact date, and it's because that's the night that the Chef Aid episode debuted on South Park. So I watched that to kind of close out the night, to kind of, dry up my tears. South Park was another big influence, especially during that time. So, by the way, my mom's still alive to this day. So she still has those complications. But there was no way she was supposed to live. And same thing with my dad. When my dad, he had colon cancer. And he actually had I think a 10% chance of living. Wow. So he had stage 4. So he wasn't supposed to make it either. And he's still alive to this day as well. So it was just kind of tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And there's a lot more that I can talk about that I'm going to not at the moment. But I think a lot of that really trained me to be useful in a crisis mode. Mm-hmm. And it's very rare that I am just completely chill when there's nobody in a crisis, my friends or family. There's always something going on, and I'm always kind of there to just know what to do. I don't freak out and stuff like that. But what really helped me when I was a kid was comedy. I had the Def Comedy Jam, and I had George Carlin and Richard Pryor, John Leguizamo, Eddie Murphy, just pretty much anything comedy related. Beavis and Butthead, I would sneak. South Park, that was another one my parents didn't care about. I could watch South Park every night, but I better watch Beavis and I can't watch Beavis and Butthead because that's the devil. But on South Park, there's a alien probe coming out of a child's ass, as in the first episode. But Beavis and Butthead putting a dog in the washer and dryer was too much.
That's really funny. It's also, I don't know. I can't explain why parents decide certain things are okay and certain things aren't okay. They're not infallible. They make mistakes. But so you really think that tragedy, it's kind of funny because think of the tragedy and comedy masks, in theater and whatnot, that thespian symbol. That's kind of what you're saying is what shaped you is the tragedy and the comedy. You needed the comedy to get over the tragedy or to help you get through some of the things, and boom, here you are.
Exactly. Even when I was like at a funeral a few years ago, I was the one in the corner making jokes, and everyone was coming over to me just to like sit down and listen, and we were all just talking, shooting the shit. And even when like a lot of other tragedy strikes, I like there was a tragedy at the beginning of this year in the hospital. Like where a death occurred, and I was there just making light of it, but not making fun of it, if that makes any sense. But everyone, was able to just kind of pull it up. So I kind of inherited that skill as a child because I just had those two extremes all the time. And not to say that I had a bad childhood. I had a very good childhood. It was filled with wonder and excitement, and my parents were more privileged back then just because my dad had a much better job and more income. So, I had a swimming pool in the backyard, an above ground one. We would always, I would have my friends come on over, and we would play, little games. We'd play water pro wrestling. We would do 3 wrestling moves on each other and then pin. And they would just go back and forth with that. We also, I had video games and stuff. So I had a great childhood. I had a lot of good times to be a kid. But when it came time for the weekends, it was a completely different story. So that really shaped me the most. I've never had, even with the extremes of my personality, I read a lot on bipolar. I mean, I don't have it, but it's weird. That's kind of how everything was raised. I don't have this middle ground where I'm either just happy or I'm just sad, and even if I am in the middle ground, there's something else going on externally, maybe with somebody else that's in a crisis, and I'm just kind of there. So I've never really had a break with that, and it really helped shape me to who I am today as a kid. So I just consumed a lot of entertainment, a lot of art, a lot of TV shows, and I watched the same ones that you did: Rugrats, Cat Dog, Ah Real Monsters, Hey Arnold. My favorite one was Doug.
Doug.
Yeah, I just always got it. And even though, looking back on it as an adult, it's okay. Mr. Dink, I think is the neighbor's name.
Yes.
The purple guy.
Yes.
Oh, hi, Douglas. How you doing? Why don't you come over in my basement and see my new invention? And I'm okay. And he would, and it would be fine. Mr. Dink didn't show him his dink. And then Skeeter was just always and Roger Klotz was just always around. And that's just what bully? Doug is at a pond, reflecting, and then oh, hey, Doug, funny. Hey, funny. What are you doing, funny? Doug's trying to take a shower, and then Roger's there, what are you doing, funny? Well, this is kind of creepy. What? Roger's just always around, That kid's got really fucked up issues. If he's just just stalking Doug, and then Doug had the same shirt every day, which is cool, and I just love that show.
I also, did you like Wild Thornberrys?
No, that was a little after I stopped.
I loved Wild Thornberrys, especially cool concept, girl can talk to animals, but the older sister who was too cool for school and total grunge, loved her. Same with the older sister in Doug.
Yeah.
The beatnik, and then they're the whole town was obsessed with beats. It was so, and wasn't his dog named Pork Chop?
Mm-hmm.
Just good shit, man. Good fucking shit. Oh, Rocko's Modern Life I really liked as well.
Me too. That really I haven't seen it. And then there was another one I grew up watching was the Jerky Boys, and
I don't know what that is.
Ooh, okay. So
no.
They started the whole I don't know if they are the originators of it, but at least they made it popular enough. Prank calls. So they would release their albums, and then I know you know who Johnny Brennan is because he's Saul on Family Guy. Oh, you farted and it went down my throat.
Yeah, that dude.
Yeah. I don't know if he did the same voice for Filbert on Rocko's Modern Life, but it was if he didn't do the voice, it was very inspired. Turn the page, wash your hands. Turn the page, wash your hands. Then you turn the page, then you wash your hands.
No, exactly. No, 100%. Oh my God. I loved that Heifer was raised by wolves, and he never thought about why. Or then there's the hidden episode that the scene that they should have cut, where Rocco's working at a sex phone operation, and he's reading from the book oh baby, oh baby, oh
yeah.
baby, and no one got it, obviously, over our heads. There's also in Rugrats a scene where, like, the mom comes down. What's the mom's name? Dee Dee?
Yes.
Dee Dee comes downstairs and Stu is making chocolate pudding, and she's like, what are you doing making chocolate pudding at 3 a.m.? He's like, hating my life, or like say something like that. And then there's also like the grandpa, one of the grandpas makes a joke about like Russian roulette and like how it's a game you don't want to win or something like that. So there's a lot of, and Disney movies like used to be that way too. I don't know if they are as much anymore. Maybe they are. Like Coco had some like hidden like adult jokey stuff that like you could get, but maybe went over kids' heads. That's like the best. Yeah. I really struggled when I was thinking about like this episode and like how much I was going to talk about like my childhood, because I think that my childhood was like really happy and content. You know, I talked about in like the insecurity episode how I was like really aware of like my body and comparing it to others from a really small age. But I was always like really mature and composed for my age. Like when my brother was born, I was like 4. I was almost 5. So it's a pretty big age gap. And I remember my mom like telling me like that I had to stop like momming him as he grew up, because I would literally mom him, like eat your vegetables, do this, do that, like that type of level of stuff. And I mean, I was mature to the point that like both my parents were working, and so in 4th grade, like I started being able to put myself on the bus to go to school in the morning. Like my mom had like a timer and alarm that would go off, and I knew I had to get on the bus. So then when I got to be about 5th or 6th grade, I started watching my brother. My mom hired a babysitter, but she didn't really do a good job. So I started watching like my brother and I was also painfully sensitive to when my parents were fighting. Like I recall not many nights, but I recall like hearing my parents fighting downstairs and me coming downstairs to see them and like sobbing and like asking if they were going to get a divorce and being like painfully aware of those things. And even then when my parents were like going to like therapy, like to couples therapy, like I was painfully aware of that and like watching my brother then and like knew all those things. So like even I don't want to say I'm like the mom of the group, because like none of my best friends like have ever put me in a situation where I need to mom anybody, but I have been in situations where I'm like just like the more composed person in the situation of people as we're going out, and I have to like really control that. I was also really painfully aware of like bad things like drug addiction and alcoholism, because I have a lot of family members who suffer through those things, and I was painfully aware of like the power that those things have over individuals from a very young age. And like I also like had to deal with like a dissonance between between the two sides of my family. Like there was always just, you know, this understanding that like my mom was not liked by like my dad's, you know, mom or whatever. Like there's always this kind of like weird animosity there that I was painfully aware of, and like that was weird. And you know, then growing up and finding out like my grandfather, or the man who I think is my grandfather, is not my grandfather. My actual biological grandfather is this dude in California who like was ostracized by my like it was just a lot of like things. And I actually remember having a conversation with somebody, and he was like so lauding like how amazing his childhood was, and I literally started tearing up because I was like, I don't have those like, oh my god, my childhood was so amazing. Like I have things that I like really loved, like reading or like TV or music, and you know, riding my bike, playing with my dog, but like I don't have this like beautiful image of like childhood. And I don't know if that's because I was just really mature and composed, and so I was like, I understood the good with the bad from a very young age, or like what. But yeah, I was always like really, really aware of that stuff.
Would you say maybe it's like when you had a good childhood, it's something that you can look back on as an adult thinking or wishing that you could go back to those times? Yeah,
and I don't. And like honestly, I always loved the idea of growing up and being an adult because I could do whatever the hell I wanted. So like that, it's always just been weird for me when people are like, oh man, wasn't this the best thing about childhood? I'm like, yeah, I remember that, but I like love being an adult. I love making money. I love, well, that sounded weird. I love making money. No, I don't love making money. I love the fact that, like, I have money to like, take care of myself and be independent with. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I really struggle with like, when people, like, talk about their childhoods, because I'm like, yeah, I really, and then there was, like, the process of maturation for me. Like, I was always like, kind of a mature person. But I felt like because I was mature, I think, like, I think sometimes I was, like, given a lot of responsibility or a lot of knowledge that maybe I shouldn't have been given. Or, like, I don't know. It's definitely in my, like, teenage years and early middle school, my late middle school years, and definitely, like, high school, there's a lot of pain in my life surrounding, like, things that I was painful, like, I was mature enough and, like, understood enough of things happening around me. And it was really, really hard.
I feel you on that. There are some parts of you typically, when, like, the summer comes along, like, those are, like, the parts of childhood that I remember the most, especially, like, when school ends and it's, like, that period from, mid to late May until about June, because my birthday is in the beginning of June. Mm-hmm. So I always, like, look at that 2 weeks of just, like, the trees are blooming, the weather's getting, like, really nice, and I just remember as a kid I would always go out and play in my backyard, and we had a screen door, so I would just stand out. I wouldn't even go outside. I would just stand really close to the screen door, and it had this particular smell. And I know whenever summer comes along, I just, overwhelmed with those feelings of nostalgia again. Mm-hmm. So, the only things I wish I can go back to were just, like, certain responsibilities. Like, I do love making money and being independent as well, but I hate bills and debt and all those other things. Or I never had that sense of, oh my God, I am 8 years old. Like, half my life was only 4 years ago. I didn't have any of that, like, deep reflection, which has kind of been a curse to me over the past maybe 10 years or so, especially over the past 4, because I think constantly now, but there's something exciting when you do, like, or at least with me, like, when I have a stray thought, or I'm like, oh my God, I have to write that down. And I just, like, pull the car over and I just go right into my phone and I just write down that idea. And I look back on it and I just build something off of it. Yesterday, or a few episodes ago, I mentioned I bought these South Park construction sets.
Yeah.
I put one together yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, it said on the box it was like 240 pieces or something like that. I'm like, all right, that's not a big deal. I didn't know that the whole thing was, like, mainly Legos. But Legos, like, they were my favorite toy growing up. So I laid this out all on my desk yesterday, and I'm being meticulous, and I'm putting these things together, and I'm organizing. I'm like, oh my God, this totally unlocked, like, a part of myself that I haven't utilized since at least the year 2000 when I was in 7th grade. And it just felt so good, and the same gears that were working in my brain are the same ones that work when I edit. Mm-hmm. So, like, when I edit film or when I, like, make something creatively, like, it's the exact same part of myself. So that was really, nurtured when I grew up. It's really hard for me to say whether or not I'm mature, because I still have an extremely immature sense of humor still.
I think you can have an immature sense of humor but still be a mature person.
Right. So what would you define maturity as, or at least as how you see it?
Well, the way I see it, maturity is the process of going from, it's like this kind of, like, acceptance growth process of, like, accepting certain, like, responsibilities and understanding the world more, and it comes pretty naturally given, like, age and experience. Like, as you have more experiences, you become more mature. You're aware and able to take on and think about things that you as a younger being couldn't think about or consider because it was either too painful or inappropriate or something like that. So I think that's what maturity is. I also remember, like, I remember feeling like there was people around me who weren't as mature as me, and it was really hard for me to be around them because I was like, you're fucking stupid, I don't want to deal with that shit, because I'm already, like, mentally, like, above it. And it actually created some animosity between me and some people in my life because I was like, you're a fucking dumbass, what are you doing? And they're like, fuck you, I'm just having fun. I'm like, no, you're being an immature idiot. And, like, that created, like, some tension.
Would you say maturity is perhaps the process of when you are slowly coming outside of yourself and being more aware of other people's feelings?
I think that's definitely part of it. I would be lying if I said it's not a part of it. I don't think it's only it though, because you come into some understandings and experiences that you are aware of people's experiences. You probably do have more empathy and sympathy for certain things going on and compassion, but there's also like an element to it where you are coming into your role and like the things that you're gonna have to do in life, and that life isn't fair sometimes, and that you don't always get your way, and that you just need to keep like persevering and doing well. So I think it's a really multifaceted, complex process, and everyone does it differently and at their own time given their unique experiences.
It makes sense. It's strange to think that, I'm going to be 31 in a couple of weeks, and I still feel like there's a lot of aspects of myself that have not fully matured. Especially when I'm in the car and Coldplay comes on, and then I say, "'Cause you're a guy full of farts. I think I smell poo." And I'm just saying that like by myself. Like that's not even like no one's there to listen, but that's just like what I'm feeling in my heart.
Again, you can have an immature sense of humor, I believe. Like what would you even consider like a mature sense of humor? Like at the end of the day, everyone laughs at like piss and fart jokes.
A mature sense of humor could be, I don't know what that is. Perhaps something that's poking fun more at objects than at people. Or
like Lenny Bruce. Like if you think Lenny Bruce is funny, you have a mature sense of humor. Or if you think like Bobcat's funny, you have a mature sense of humor. Like, I don't know. I think like, because if we think about the people that are like really famous for comedy, there's always a certain element of like them screeching into a microphone and it's really funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe not Louis C.K., although, obviously we don't talk about him anymore. But like Joe Rogan, and not that he's like super big. You know who I can't stand comedy-wise? The dude with the puppets.
Jeff Dunham?
Oh, I hate him.
What about him?
I think he's so, I don't like the characters. I think it's kitschy. It creeps me out because they're fucking dolls. Not because they're dolls, because they're not marionettes.
Puppets.
Ventriloquist puppets, yeah. They're terrifying, and I just can't stand. I actually one time was hanging out with a guy, and he put that on Netflix, and I was like, oh my god, how am I going to suffer through this shit? I think I might have just turned over and went to bed.
I feel that way about comedians who, a big one died a few years ago. Actually, like the night of WrestleMania 30. I can't remember his name, but I hated him so much because his entire shtick was he's fat.
John Panette?
Yes.
You don't like him?
I hate him. I don't like comedians where their entire shtick is just the one thing. Like, he's fat. Like, I don't like comedians who what they're going to say next.
Are you a fan of Gabriel Iglesias? He used to use a lot. He used to use, like, a big part of his act was about his, like, body size and whatever.
But not the whole act.
No, not the whole act. John Panette, yeah, it was kind of... Yeah, he even had, like, one of his specials is called, like, I'm Starving.
Right.
Like, he, like, was very, like, in your face about...
He was. And like, another comedian I feel that way about is Dat Phan.
I've heard the name. His
entire shtick is that his family is Vietnamese, and so is he.
Yeah, that's lame.
Yeah, there's a lot of comedians like on Def Comedy Jam where they're just like black people do this, white people do that. Like it gets really old after a while. But
it's not very innovative.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that sometimes that stuff is good, especially when it's a really good observation, but it has to be mixed in with a lot of other things. So it's kind of like if you just had a gigantic plate of mashed potatoes for dinner and not the piece of meat and not the vegetable and not the dessert.
That sounds delicious to me. Sorry.
Oh yeah, dude, for real. So.
If I could just eat mashed potatoes. Oh, but like I was actually thinking as you were talking about that, when you think about like those people and those jokes, like Dat Phan and John Panette, when they're making fun of an aspect of themselves in their life, like who is meant to laugh? It's most likely the majority. And the marginalized is making fun of their marginalization, and then the majority is made to laugh. And it's kind of like this weird power dynamic. Like, of course, there's like not necessarily with the like black people do this, white people do that shtick, but like whenever there's like these jokes are to be made at the marginalized, like for example, the Big Bang Theory is a great example of it, because even though people have this affinity for these characters, you're meant to align yourself with Penny, the quote-unquote normal girl. You're not meant to identify with Sheldon or even Leonard to an extent. You think they're weird, and like at least in the first early seasons, like you're made to laugh at them because they're so weird and nerdy and geeky and blah blah blah, and they don't understand women, blah blah blah. Like you as the audience member, the normal person, and you're laughing at them. You're further like marginalizing them and like making comedic relief out of their difference. And like that always, I tried to have a really thoughtful conversation with some of my students about that, and they just couldn't handle it. It was too much for them to consider.
I definitely see where you're coming from. I mean, I have not seen an episode of Big Bang Theory to really play off the reference. All I know is like the little previews, like next time on Big Bang Theory, like Sheldon's like, oh yeah, this is my turbulizer, and you got big tits. Like that's all. Next time on Big Bang Theory, like that's all.
No, it's like a 30-second, like, oh my god, Sheldon and his, I've heard, Amy, his like wife or whatever, like, oh my god, this is gonna happen next time on Big Bang Theory, like. Oh my god, it's like horrible. My mom really likes it, and we used to watch it like when it first came out, like how many years ago. But like, no, like when you authentically consider like who is supposed to be laughing and why, it's really, yeah. Do you think, how they always say that girls mature faster than boys, and we were talking about like maturity is like a kind of like a thing that comes out of experience. Do you think that's because girls have experiences where they have to be more mature than boys? Like I've seen on the internet where some people are like, well, girls get sexualized at such a younger age than boys that they have to be prepared or they have to do these things, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, I could kind of see that, but I'm not sure.
So let's define maturity first.
Okay.
So, for instance, if a girl were to mature earlier than a boy, are we talking about just the emotional aspect, or are we talking about the physical aspect?
Oh, well, I think physically, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't girls mature faster because they have, I think it's because we have estrogen that promotes estrogen promotes height growth, whereas testosterone does width, something like that. Basically, physiologically, girls mature faster. Isn't that correct?
Perhaps. I don't know. I think I was a really sick child and I missed out on a lot of health class. But let's just say for the sake of argument it is. So when girls mature faster, that means that let's just say a 13-year-old girl would be more apt to be cool, calm, and collected in serious situations than a 13-year-old boy. Yeah,
and so do we want to think that she has had to be more cool, calm, and collected because of situations in her life than a boy has had to?
Part of me wants to say yes, but I've really seen it both ways.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, so
it's all dependent on like your unique experience.
I do agree that girls are sexualized more at a younger age, to where, or even as early as 12 is when they start to notice other men staring at their bodies. Yeah. Especially like, girls, okay, it's today, it's 90 degrees outside. There's going to be a lot of girls just riding around on their bikes with short shorts on. Mm-hmm. Not to attract men, but because it's fucking hot outside. No, because
it's fucking hot as balls. And also, that's all they really sell for girls. Like the fashion trends are out there. It's really hard to find capri length or like knee length shorts that are cute and like desirable to wear.
Oh, God, it's definitely in that book, Packaging Girlhood, by the authors whose name I can't remember, and I'm going to bring a list next time we do a podcast so I don't keep, forgetting either the author or the title of the book. But in Packaging Girlhood, it's just this entire market of, portraying this image of what a girl looks like. But with boys, there were some really mature boys I've met, growing up, but I was part of the immature group, only because I didn't, because at home, I had to be mature. I had to be the mature one. But when it came to time, at school, I didn't really have too much. I mean, I did have a little bit of empathy, but I didn't have too much to where I would go along with the crowd. Like, I'll give you an example. There was this teacher. His name was Mr. Reisler. I don't know if he's alive, and if because in 7th and 8th grade, he was the math teacher, and every single day, the entire class would just fuck with this guy, hit him, push him, like the most horrifying things that I can remember. Like the whole class did it. There would be days like where he had no control of the class, and the kids were literally pushing him around. One kid brought a pink volleyball and just whipped it at his head. Me and a few other kids, what we would do is we would hang out in the back of the classroom, and we would draw on the Scholastic News. We just draw big dicks on them, and then just throw all the Scholastic newspapers like outside the window. There other kids would throw paper at him, and like there was like a whole group of kids who just call him like stupid ass. So I wasn't independent of thought enough to be like, oh, like I knew I felt this was wrong, but because everybody else was having a good time, I was like, all right, this is totally fine. And sometimes like the police would come, or like the school police officer, other teachers would come in and yell at us, the principal, and every day, and that would shut us up for a few hours. And then it was just back to fucking with this guy. So I guess my main point is Mr. Reisler is the reason why teachers should not have guns.
I think there's a lot of reasons beyond shitty kids that teachers shouldn't have guns, but that's the thing is like when you're like that young, you just are like going along with the crowd, like it's funny, you're like don't have that like independent sense of self. I mean, I think there was probably kids in the room that were like, this isn't right, like we shouldn't be doing this, but there's also kids who bought into the mob mentality of like, let's fuck with Mr. Reisler till he cries or quits or shoots himself.
Yeah, it's weird how like we get our cues from how other people are behaving. So, for instance, like if I were just in a quiet theater and I was just like, yeah, woo, fuck yeah, and I just started saying that by myself, I'd be an asshole. But if I was at a sporting event,
yes,
that would be completely accepted. Whereas, I mentioned a few podcast episodes ago, I was at a Florence and the Machine concert, and I was in the pit, so literally maybe 20 feet away from her, and I was standing still the whole time just staring at her. But that's just how I enjoy stuff, I'm just like just that the voice on her is just godlike. And everyone else is jumping up and down with their arms in the air, and I'm standing there. I look really suspicious. Have you ever seen the movie Strangers on a Train?
No.
It's with Alfred Hitchcock. There's a famous scene in there where there's a tennis match, and they're going back and forth with the tennis ball, and in the center of the frame is just the man's head looking straight, and everybody else's head is turning left and right. And you could just and that's how I looked in the crowd. But with the certain rules, it's kind of like on the highway, we can drive 80 miles an hour and it's totally fine. But if we drove 80 miles an hour on a little suburban street, like that is really reckless. So I guess at the time we're trying to, especially like at the time, like 7th and 8th grade, like our bodies are completely changing. Like not only are we going like through like a physical puberty, but an emotional puberty. I'm more aware of like what girls think of me, and everyone's beating the shit out of Mr. Reisler. I never beat the shit out of him or threw anything at him, but I didn't do anything to stop it, and I created chaos in the back where I just drew dicks on everything. So,
to kind of go to the idea of like how it's normal to do specific actions in certain situations and not in others, there's a sociological concept, I think, or it might be psychological. It's called liminality. I had to do a research, like I had to, quote unquote. I did a research paper freshman year of college. They make you take like a how to write for college class, and it ended with this capstone research project basically, and I wanted to do like, why are mosh pits a thing? So liminality is this concept that like we do something that would otherwise be considered unacceptable in other environments, like hitting people, pushing people, like you do in a pit, hardcore dancing, all of that. We can do that in this specific situation, and it's completely appropriate, justified, and sometimes encouraged. So that's this idea that in this space you can do that. Same with like the Florence Machine concert. If people every day were like jumping up and down, singing and dancing like in the everyday life, A, they'd probably be really happy, but B, like we would all be like, what the fuck is wrong with them? Like if you saw that on the street, you might be a little concerned, unless it was some weird performance art. But like so it's like interesting that we as a society have like said, okay, this is justifiable in this space, this is justifiable in another space. Laws pass that justify it as well, like your example with like speeding on the highway versus going 80 miles per hour like in your neighborhood or whatever. Also, like, is there even like space to go 80 miles per hour in a neighborhood? Like, what the hell?
But people do, like, outside, like in my neighborhood, usually somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. I always hear one engine revving from literally the mile down the street on the main road every single time, and they're drag racing. It's like, dude, you can't even go more than 25 on that street, and there's cops everywhere. So why the fuck are you doing that?
Yeah, I don't really get that.
So it was, I don't know. I tend to think that I really matured once I started surrounding myself with more mature people, but then I myself, it's weird. I always say that I'm kind of like tofu in a way. Like, I'm not like this, like, I'm not a steak or a chicken or a burger or a pork chop in a sense where I have like my own distinct thing, at least socially. So that's why I have a lot of different types of friends. I don't have like one type of friend I hang out with, which is really rare for when my friends meet each other. They'll get along, but they might not be friends themselves.
Yes.
Just because like I'm fulfilled being friends with you in a very different way than I'm fulfilled being friends with like my friend Joe.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like or you know, like Becca or whoever, you know. So everyone's a little bit different, and it's like, you know, when I spend time with my friends, like there's a little piece inside of me that is extended there, and sometimes it's my immature sense of humor, and but I usually use that to connect with everybody. But there's a lot of serious stuff that I do write down that I could write a serious essay on, but I relay it into the world by being funny. I never really truly felt that I was mature until maybe recently, where I realized, hey, I'm in this position to, like, where, like, especially like when I was working with the students at the college I work at, I'm slowly starting to realize I am just completely swearing and being my 100% genuine self around them. And I'm wondering, like, all right, they are looking up to me. Like, there was this one student I worked with. She was 18 years old, and I'm going to be like, you know, I'm going to be 31 in a few months. And I'm just realizing, like, holy crap, like, this person is looking up to me. Mm-hmm. Same thing when I work at the warehouse. We hire a lot of new, like, young kids. Like, one kid just graduated high school a few days ago. Yeah. This kid's looking up to me. And it's weird when kids are looking up to me as an adult, where I don't see myself as an adult, but I am. It's weird. I have full and complete access to this world. There's nothing where I have to wait to be a grown-up in order to get it, because I could just get it right now. I can if I had the money, I could buy a house, I could rent a car, I could do anything. I could go see an R-rated movie. I don't have to sign a permission slip for myself, or my parents don't have to consent for anything other than, you know, like, there's really nothing else. But there was a point in time where we watched Moulin Rouge in high school, and we were all like 15, 16 years old.
Scandalous.
Yeah, and we had to sign a permission slip, even though it was a PG-13 movie. There's quite a few movies like that, but I don't know. There's still part of myself like saying, like, okay, I'm gonna get to this point in my life where I'm gonna be adult as fuck, and I'm gonna be like such an adult and mature. But I think I'm just gonna kind of be like, my core will be the same, but it'll be a little bit different, like even 10 years from now. And it's just really hard to see the maturity thing, because it's not like the game The Sims, where I think we've had this conversation before outside the podcast, where as soon as you go from a teenager to an adult, you literally spin around and sparks shoot out your ass, and then you just become an adult.
Yeah, it's not that simple. It's usually a lot of like painful, awful, and joyous experiences that bring you to maturity. That's like, it's this kind of like beautiful, amazing process. The sad thing is some people have to do it way too early, because of various things going on in their life. But yeah, it's a process that we all go to. It's almost like, you know, there's this saying that like only two things are certain in life, death and taxes. Maybe like maturity is also part of that. Like, I don't know an adult to this day who doesn't have some shred of maturity to them. You know what I mean? Like, there's some immature people who are adults, but they still have elements of them that are matured and have, like, changed over time. They're not, they're not their 12-year-old self anymore. There's definitely things that have changed about them, even in the most immature people I know.
Yeah, I see that too, but there's always, when it comes to puppies, there's always, like, that little kid aspect that comes out when there's just something about, like, a little dog.
Okay, but, like, that's not even maturity, though, right? It's just kind of, like, the joy of, like, a puppy cannot be denied.
Right, but it's not to say that you're immature if you're just like, hello, canine, and you're just petting the dog's head.
Hello, small canine.
Hello, how are you doing?
Thou?
Are you, yeah, but, at least you're still part of it, like, you're still a kid.
Yes.
Like, when you see that, and, like, even, like, when you see something that you've never seen before, that's like the one thing that I really miss out on with childhood, is that there's very few things that I have never seen before now.
Yeah, that is true. That idea of, like, learning something for the first time, or, like, being legitimately blown away when you learn something or how to do something or figure out how something works, like, that's huge.
It really is. I remember I was a late bloomer for a lot of things. I didn't learn how to ride a bike until 5th grade, and it was one of the biggest, like, struggles of my life because I just couldn't maintain the balance, and I didn't even learn how to tie my shoes until 8th grade. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I remember, that was another conversation we had outside the podcast. I just was struggling, crying. I just couldn't get these little aspects, but now there's very few things. Like, right now I'm going to the gym and I'm going to try to lose weight, but I guess that's the only thing to where I'm going to be trying to obtain a goal, but it's not because I was young and now that I'm old I can do this now. It's just like, I got to get my shit together because I don't want to keep losing my breath every time I bend over to tie my shoes. It's just really, I think a lot of ours right now, like, in this moment, we're a mixture of all the things that have ever happened to us and every decision we've ever made. Yeah. So hence, like, if we would have done something different in our lives, or maybe we had different lives growing up, we wouldn't have this podcast. We wouldn't be sitting across from each other back to front. So, for instance, I just recently passed my 15-year anniversary of being straight edge. Mm-hmm. So I haven't had smoke. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do drugs for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I just surpassed that. I know for a fact that 15 years earlier, I could have gone down a different path and my whole life would have been different. Mm-hmm. Maybe I would have different things. Who knows? Maybe I would be married with a wife and kids. I don't know if I would be happy, but I would have different things. And perhaps we would have never have met. But because these decisions, they've led me to this moment right now. Yeah. So do you ever think that sometimes?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, yesterday my mom and I had a conversation where I was telling her that a friend and I were going to go to a bar, and she said, "Oh, your dad and I almost bought that bar when you were 10." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I've never heard this story before." And in downtown of my hometown, there was this old bar. It's got a nice beer garden, and apparently it was up for sale. And my parents were thinking about starting their own business, and kind of like my dad would have a normal job according to my mom, and my mom would kind of build it as kind of like a wine bar or something really nice with a nice kitchen or something. And then above that bar is this like huge like house apartment type thing. So they were thinking that they would buy the bar and the place above, and that they, according to my mom, they heavily considered it and researched it for about 2 to 3 months before all of a sudden saying, you know what, we don't want our kids to grow up above a bar, and that we don't want that to be their life, is that their parents own and run a bar. And so they chose to move us to another location. But it was this weird moment of like, wow, my life would be completely different. Like, I would have been living in like downtown of my hometown. I wouldn't have had like a backyard. We probably wouldn't be able to have had dogs. I would have, I'm assuming, been involved in the upkeep of a bar as a young child, or like, you know, like I would have that idea, and that idea that I have to like help out with the family business and stuff like that, which is another huge concept. If it was like successful, or if it was a complete failure, then we would have been in a completely different like economic situation and had to deal with that. So I definitely do consider like how all these things have really shaped me, and if just one was off by a day, it's like dominoes or the butterfly effect. Like if just one thing was off, I wouldn't be the same. Even like considering like the people I was around when I grew up, like my best friend growing up lived across the street from me, Olivia. Love you, Olivia, if you're listening to this. She like really heavily influenced me and got me into like we like classic rock together, but she really opened the doors to like Hawthorne Heights and like Breaking Benjamin, Evanescence, like those like kind of like gothy bands from the like mid 2000s. We really connected over them, and like she really opened up my eyes. You know, to this day I still like from that moment I like let me open up into different musical categories. She introduced me to all of my best friends in high school, like and if I hadn't had her, like I don't know where I would have ended up or like what I would be into or whatever. So I do totally consider that. And it's honestly like you can play a head game with yourself about like, oh God, what if I never did that? Or even like I think about, you know, like with relationships, like you know, if me and my ex were only together for like 3.5 years rather than 5, where would I have been? What would I have done? Like, you know, how would things be different or whatever? You can make yourself go crazy with it, but it's really interesting. It's a good thought experiment.
It is, because it makes you think going forward, like, should I make this decision?
Yeah.
You know, yes or no. Whereas before we were shaped by just things that happened to us.
Yeah.
You know, like when I was a kid, I didn't ask to be brought into existence.
No one did.
I didn't have, so none of us consented, no enthusiastic consent to being born. It just sort of happened, and we just inherited all the stuff around us. So,
well, even that, think about conception. That's one of those things that like, another day, another time, you know, when your mom wasn't ovulating, you wouldn't be a thing, you know, like even that.
Definitely. It really is this mixture of nature and nurture. I don't think there's one more than the other, and I think this can best be exemplified through music. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you know, the nature part of music and musicians and talent is just like a skill that they were born with. That's the definition of talent. It's just a natural born skill that is, you know, excelled at. And nurture is whatever the times are. So, the people that came out with songs like in the 1950s and 60s, they were influenced by what came before them. And same thing now with like the new music today. They were influenced by what they grew up with. So like Ariana Grande was influenced by Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
But Mariah Carey was probably influenced by Whitney Houston. And Whitney Houston was, you know, Aretha Franklin. So it's just like this long continuous cycle. So, you know, even the songs that you think that have changed you, and that's another podcast down the line for us. It's just music in general. Mm-hmm. But it, like, art in and of itself is just this completely harmonious experience that is both nature and nurture. So we're both participating like in this crazy ass world, and there's really no escaping it. So
no one gets out of here alive,
dude. Like, had you been born in like the 30s.
Oh, I think about that all the time. I think about I'm so lucky that I was born now, because even I was thinking literally yesterday, I was doing the dishes and I was like, I'm 25. If I was born 50 years earlier, or actually, let's say I was born in the 40s, like my grandmother. At 25, she had 3 kids and had been married twice. Like, what the fuck? Like that could have been my life. How many years ago? 6, you know, how many years is that? 50 years before I was born.
Like, the relationship with your ex would have been, he would have gone out to maybe, I don't know, a regular job, and you would have been at home just tending. You wouldn't have your hair color. You would just have your natural hair, and you'd be wearing, like, you know, a regular, you know, like a skirt, but not too liberal. Like, you would be wearing, you know... in
the 1950s, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it would be natural hair color. It would be, like, you know, really demure stuff. You know, it would be, like, TV dinners and cleaning the house and then, you know, drinking vodka martinis with Xanax to cope with my life.
It would be. But now you have a completely different life. Not only that, but outlook on life just because of the times that you were born in.
Oh, exactly, too. And, like, how much of your parents, like, influence how you, like, view the world, or, like, how much, you know, your education, the people you meet, your friends, like, they really, really affect how you think and perceive the world.
Definitely. Like, my parents were from the baby boomer generation. So... I never saw them as young or hip. I always saw them as old, because my parents they were like 36, 37 when they had me.
Yeah.
And they had my brother when they were like 29.
Wow.
So I never saw them as like the young hip parents that you do see nowadays, where the references aren't really too far off. But you know, I just grew up in a time where we had the house phone. That was just like, it was just the phone,
landline.
the landline phone with the curly cord. And,
Yes.
you know, like we had 56K for the dial up, and the computer would screech every time you would connect to the internet.
Yeah.
Every day.
Exactly.
That's even a ringtone now, which is nuts.
Have you seen, there's like videos on the internet where someone will play that noise to like a net gen kid, like a kid who was born post 9/11, and they'll be like, what is this noise? And they're like, no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. Like, they have no conception of it. Well, even like, I'm teaching kids that weren't even sentient beings when 9/11 happened.
Oh God.
You know what I mean? And like, they don't get that. Like, it's really difficult for them to understand it. Like, that's another thing, talking about maturity. I was in 3rd grade when 9/11 happened.
Ew.
And they explained it to us as kind of like, we went on lockdown. A lot of people's parents were picking them up during the day. And a person like came to our room, talked to the teacher, and the teacher flat out was like, students, there was like a terrorist attack in New York City. Like, she flat out said it. And we're going to be fine. We're going to carry on with our normal day. But, you know, we're going to leave the door locked. If you need to go to the bathroom, like a hall attendant's going to take you there, blah, blah. And by the end of our day, only 1/3 of our class was still there, because everyone else's parents had pulled them out because they had no idea what was happening. And that, but like that in our generation's like collective understanding and conscience, that totally shaped us. I mean, definitely as adults too, but like, you know, the kids I'm teaching have no idea about that.
God, I was a freshman in high school, and
did they put it on the TV so you guys could see?
They wheeled it in. I remember I was getting ready. I started at second hour. I didn't start at first hour. So when I was eating my breakfast that morning, like the first plane went in, and then we went into school, and everybody was talking about it, and everyone was completely dead silent and watching it. And you know, about second and third hour, the principal got on the intercom and said, all right, we got to evacuate the building. We got to get out of here. So we went to the football field, and
they evacuated the high school?
The entire high school.
Oh my God.
Just because there were rumors that even Greeny Mills Mall, they apparently there was some fear that there would be some guys in there with like backpack bombs.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'd heard, it's funny like what you hear about like 9/11 now, because like, so I work with a woman who was at the campus of University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign at the time, and there was rumors flying that could be a target because of the engineering campus. And of course everyone was worried about Chicago being hit, and you know, all these major cities and metropolises or whatever. I didn't realize that like even Gurney Mills was like, people were worried about that.
It was everywhere, man. Like that was, you know, and then at like fourth period, which was maybe like 10 o'clock in the morning, 10, 11 o'clock at the latest, they just said, all right, everybody go home. And then I ran home, and because my dad worked at the Sears Tower then, and I didn't hear that, and there's no phone and no cell phone.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I only had the TV to run home to, and then as soon as I get home, my dad is on the couch watching the news, picking his toenails, you know, because he took the first train out, and he said that train coming out of Union Station, it usually is a slow crawl. He said like it just flew out.
Oh, I
like
bet it did.
He passed Western Avenue within less than 2 minutes.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And that's like a 10-minute like
no, it
crawl.
is. It's a 10-minute crawl.
So
that, yeah, no, I can't remember if my dad traveled like a lot from about 5 onward. Another thing that probably matured me a lot was like my mom, it was like me, my brother, and my mom a lot like during the week. My dad would only really be home on the weekends, sometimes in the summer. We always had like usually a summer vacation together, but like for a long time my sole communication with my dad during the week was he would call us at night and say he loved us and ask about how our day was, and that was it. But I can't recall if he was traveling or not, but I do remember my uncle was going to the airport to fly to New York, upstate New York for like a hunt or something like that. And I remember like crying in my desk and my teacher saying, "What's wrong?" And I said, "My uncle was supposed to go to New York on a plane." And she was like, "I'm sure it's fine. Like, you know, let's calm down, blah, blah. It's already happened," or like whatever. But yeah, dude, like, fuck, that was a scary ass day. My ex has this theory that 9/11 spurred a lot of revival in Christianity and like feel goodness in TV shows, about how like right after that point we had all these TV shows like what was the one with, was it Ryan? It wasn't Ryan Seacrest, but it was like this annoying ass guy, and they would rebuild somebody's home or their whole life.
God, I know what you're talking about, but I forgot.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like it's got a really like dumb name, but like all those like feel good entertainment revival in Christianity, blah blah blah. I remember going to like a 1-year candlelit vigil for 9/11, like in my downtown hometown, and like crying, and like somebody, like a man, like told me not to cry. Like I remember that.
We had a very conservative mood in the country from, you know, I would say like the entire Bush years, or at least from 2000 to 2004, at least like, especially like with the media and just the overall mood in the country, because after 9/11 happened, I think that's kind of when America had this like maturity where like, okay, like it's not all Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails and all that shit. We're like united, but we, you know, like, I mean, obviously it's more complicated than that. I'm not saying it was all like, you know, fuzzy pickles and stuff like that, but yeah, dude, fuzzy pickles, I'm going to bring it back. But, we just kind of like, it all just clicked. We all were thinking the same thing, and it was just on our minds. And,
that's so weird.
It was a tragedy. Like we all just like had to come through the funeral, but,
can you just for a moment, let's just acknowledge the fact that like we're talking about an event that matured our whole nation, and like there's people younger than us who don't even understand. Like that's so weird.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like God I almost just said thank God we never had a world war, but fuck, like I remember the address given by Bush that we were going to go to. Did we go to Iraq first or Afghanistan? Whatever, his big like war on terror speech. I remember my parents watching it and them saying that they were gonna like, you know, that I don't know if he used harsh words like we were going to retaliate or whatever, but oh my God, it was so scary. I remember also being terrified of airplanes then, or like security. I still partially am. Like I don't like being on planes. It's like I know everything's gonna be fine, but there's always that like shred of something could happen.
Yeah, I have that feeling too, but thankfully every time I've been on the plane, I've been extremely sleep deprived because I had to either take a 4 a.m. flight or I didn't sleep the night before, so I wasn't even coherent, you know, or lucid during any of those flights. But the fear is still there. That really changed everything, and then we had to all get our shit together, and I think all of that kind of stopped as soon as MySpace came out.
What do you mean?
So this is another thing I've been really thinking about lately. I think the reason why certain things become so massive and popular the way they do is because they tune into a part of ourselves and it externalizes it. So with, you know, at least like this part of our humanity with social media, what it really does is it tunes to our need. Like it really exposes our impulsivity, and it really caters to our feeling, our instant gratification, and always being up to date with the newest things. And I think because it's just such a reflection on our values. I can't remember who said it, but it's not like social media is not like the cause of anything. If anything, it's an amplifier.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we talked about that recently, how it like in the anger episode we talked about like passive aggressiveness, and that's how it started it.
Yeah, it's just this reflection of all of our values. So when we are united with things now, it's very, very temporary. Even now, like the Parkland school shooting, that's kind of all gone away.
Yeah, except the other, you know, we just had 2 or 3 happen last week.
Yeah, so like this unity is so, you know, I'm wondering like, was this, I think we just still had that natural unity in 9/11 because all we had were newspapers and the television. We didn't have, like, there was the internet, but it was still very, very premature, and it wasn't like it was now. Definitely not as like ease of access as like a cell phone. But
yeah, well, think about if we had cell phones, like how would the experience of 9/11 be different? It would be everyone could check, Facebook even has a check-in for like disasters. Like you can check in that you are safe or whatever. I mean, if we had that during 9/11, the aspect of like people, even the people critiquing the president about why they were going to Afghanistan or Iraq, when that lie was made about they have weapons of mass destruction, we're going to go get them. Like, the lies that we now understand as lies, and we now understand that, like, I'm basically getting at, like, not the subversive, but the people who smelled bullshit, they didn't even have a channel to say that's fucking bullshit. Because where do you get a lot of the counter movement and thought processes now? It's on blogs, Facebook videos, it's stuff on the internet. They didn't even have that channel to say, no, this is bullshit. Now, obviously, like, there's people like, I think Jimmy Dore, and I'm not sure if, what's her face? I can't recall, Empire Files. I can't recall if they had channels at that point to be dismissive about, like, what Bush was doing at that time. But, like, seriously, like, now they have platforms where they're able to through social media.
And it should be taken more seriously, but it's not. But I think even at the time, like, okay, Complaints and Grievances was George Carlin's special post 9/11 in 2001. He originally had material that was later released as its standalone CD, even 2 years ago, called I Kind of Like It When a Lot of People Die. And that was supposed to be part of its Complaints and Grievances material. But even when he did, like, he cut that material from the stand-up special, and, I don't think he probably could have recovered as quickly as he did if he kept it in. But he even said during that stand-up special that he's going to cooperate with the United States government. And in the previous special, I think it was back in town and you're all diseased, maybe even doing it again, he says, like, he has a simple rule that he lives by. He doesn't believe anything the government tells him. The only comedian I can think of that was really on the money with all of that angst was Doug Stanhope, but he was so underground at that point. When you listen to these old albums, you're like, holy shit, like, these ideas were so deep in the ground. I don't think the social media aspect of it is helping, because it is still playing on our impulsivity and our, spur of the moment. And it's a reflection of our values, but it's not giving us values.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't add to the culture necessarily. It reflects the values. And some people might say, oh, well, like, it adds this feeling of connectivity. It adds this draw for XYZ. But really, at the end of the day, like, it really is a reflection of our society and all its warts. There's a really great part of Fahrenheit 451 where Montag, the protagonist, goes to Faber, this old man that he's met and who he took his first book from, that Montag's, like, hoarding these books. And Faber says, the reason you're going into these books is you're trying to find the truth. And sometimes the truth is in these books. You can also find it in entertainment or whatever. But the reason we like books is because it exposes the pores of life. And that's the truth. And so, in a way, social media can never expose the truth. It's never enhancing our life or experience. It's merely a mirror of all the reflection of the best and worst parts of us. And, like, that's it. It's just the extremes. Like, you brought up, like, bipolar earlier. Like, that concept of, like, people with bipolar do have times when they're in the middle ground, clearly, when they're feeling well, but they also have those shifts. And I feel like on social media, you only have the shifts. You only have the extreme. And it's just, we have the best parts of humanity and the absolute worst parts of humanity all contained online.
It's doing something. And I'm not completely on board with the fact that humanity is dead, because when I was doing my volunteer work last year, I probably mentioned this story, but I was in like a second grade class. No, I was actually in the kindergarten class, and, like, these were all 6-year-old kids. And during the presentation, one of the kids raised their hand and said, that it has nothing to do with the presentation or anything. The kid said that one day, like, his dad forgot to pick him up from soccer practice and he was alone, and then the kid started bawling his eyes out, and as the kid was walking out of the room, the class got up to, like, comfort him and pat him on the back.
Oh.
So it's like, kids are able to do this stuff.
No, I actually, there was a similar story from a coworker where there was a student giving a speech and he literally, like, shut down and couldn't do it. These are freshmen in high school, and his whole class was like, no, you did such a good job, like, try it again tomorrow, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, I think we're capable of it. I think it's in us all.
Of course. It's part of us to connect with each other, you know, because we are social creatures, and I think we kind of lose fact of, like, all this bullshit that comes in between. And I still think that it's really easy to poke fun and make blame for the millennials and what they did. But if anything, you know, hey, social media wasn't created by the millennials. It's used by the millennials. It was created by the Gen Xers.
Yeah, well, the real problem is that it's not the millennials' fault that they have become prey and addicted to social media. Because I don't like when people blame parenting, but let's legitimately think about this. When people think it's okay for younger and younger generations to become addicted to these devices or putting themselves out on these, like, Facebook accounts or Snapchat, this instant gratification thing and dopamine rush that you're getting them hooked on from a young age, like, that's a problem. The fact that no one's regulated that for these kids is a problem. We're expecting them to have these regulation and self-management skills, but we're never taught them. Like, it's ridiculous. I do agree that it's like, why are we blaming the millennials for being addicted to their phones when their parents gave them to them?
And social media and the internet itself is providing us with ease of access, but what it's really doing is providing us with ease of observation.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just observe some of the things that people are doing, and it's a lot easier to put us into this hole to where, you know, it's just like the whole me generation, MySpace, iPhone, you know, like, just like it's like a very selfish generation. I don't think, I mean, of course, like, the generations, like, will always have their, like, you know, positives and negatives and their flaws and their attributes, but I don't think that humanity is dead. Like, that's still instilled in us. Yeah. I think there's still a lot.
We're still social creatures.
Yeah, especially, like, with all the new stuff going on now. Not necessarily the new stuff, but the new awareness of, like, suicide, of bullying, of, like, these really serious adult issues that these kids are having to tackle. Sexual harassment, objectification, like, all this. So I think there's a lot more maturity with the youth than they're given credit for, only because, like, when they are given those moments of, like, the serious issues, like, they are mature and they're, like, composed, but then it's a lot easy to observe them on social media when they're just taking a selfie at a baseball game.
Yeah, and I had a thought when you were talking about, like, the me versus the I. You know, when we have the me and I, some people, it is selfish, it's focused on the self, but think about how isolating that is. It's just me and it's just I. These, you know, things like Facebook and MySpace were supposed to be these massive, you know, webs of interconnectivity, and we're all, like, communicating with each other, and, like, you can stay in contact with your family across the country, across the world even, and instead it's just this isolating factor. It brings people in even more into themselves. They don't actually, like, use it as a tool to really connect with those. Like, even yesterday I was at a coffee shop because I had a Rusev day, and I was probably the only person in the coffee shop not using their phone, like, looking at, like, I wasn't listening to music. I was, like, legitimately just, like, enjoying the moment and, like, being alive, and, like, on a beautiful summer day, like, in a cool coffee shop. I'd been walking, it was really hot, came inside, got, like, a latte or whatever, and, like, a nice latte, and just, like, sat there and just was. And, like, the fact that, like, now when you look around, like, how frequently do you see people that, you know, the technology, the phone, the screen is just this way to isolate themselves because they can't deal with being uncomfortable. They can't deal with not being stimulated, like, at all times.
It's almost getting to the point where, in order to really see if somebody has matured, they're able to just put their phone away.
Oh, 1,000%. And actually, I've enforced in my classroom this policy where I don't allow phones to be used. If it's a reading day and you can listen to music, that's one thing. But my thing is, and next year when I have another batch of students, I'm going to talk to them about the fact that, like, I'm not doing this to be a jerk. I'm doing this because it's a skill that you need to have. You need to be able to sit without your phone for 50 minutes at a time and just focus on a task. You know, I do my best to make this engaging and have you collaborate with your peers. Like, it's a legitimate skill, because even when you go to college, like, your professors do not tolerate you being on your phone during class. You know, even at work, you know, the boss is not going to tolerate you being on your phone because you're bored or you finished your task. Instead, they want you to be a go-getter. They want you to go find something to do. You need to cultivate that now rather than just never, you know. It's so sad, but no, you're exactly right. Even that being said, I have students who they tell me that their parents are worse than them at the dinner table, that the parents are there with the screen and the parents are, like, on their phone, like, barely communicating with the kids at dinner time, if they even have a communal dinner time. So it's like, it's really infected. Like, even my mom has issues with, like, putting the screen down. Like, I'll be talking to her and, like, don't you hate this when you're talking to somebody and then they pick up their phone to, like, do something and you're like, are you even fucking listening to me? Like, I literally, I'll just, like, I'll stop till you're done.
It's the equivalent of clipping your nails mid-conversation.
Yeah, it's just like, really? Do you have to fucking do that now?
Right.
Can you just be immersed? Like, even, I mean, I think we have a good listenership and a good body of listeners out there. But even the concept of, like, do you think there's any millennials that, like, legitimately listen to a podcast? That they will just sit and be and listen? Like, this isn't necessarily, like, the lights and the beautiful images of, like, a video game or a movie, and, you know, it's really cerebral. And I'm not saying that there is not millennials out there who don't like these types of things, but I still think, like, it's a new, like, the concept of just, like, sitting and reading or sitting and listening to something is, I think it's probably new to them in some ways.
It is. I'm gonna just bet that more kids, and when I say that, let's just say high school years,
okay,
listen to podcasts than they don't, because I think they will listen to something that suits their interests. So if there's, like, a video game podcast, they'll watch that. They even watch other people play video games on YouTube.
Well, and I was actually talking to my brother yesterday about that, like, Game Grumps, where they're, like, doing, like, playthroughs or whatever. Fucking Game Grumps. But that's basically a podcast, but you can watch them play a game at the same time. You know what I mean?
They were playing The Simpsons, one of the Simpsons games, and somebody did an impression of Marge Simpson, like, Homer, can you go out and buy eggs for Bart? And, like, it's its own thing on YouTube now. Just type in eggs for Bart. And it's just that. But I think no matter what, we are craving listening. And even with the video games now, like, there's this new one called Detroit Become Human. And it's about I don't know too much about it, but a lot of them, like, deal with, like, making very serious choices to enhance the gameplay of this, like, to enhance the story. And, like even video games now, where it used to be Pong and then Tetris and then Little Super Mario, jumping on little Goombas, it has evolved into overarching narratives to where a game like The Last of Us can have such a very risky and poignant ending that really connects, that, like, not only is controversial, but, like, really says a lot about the human spirit in a video game.
And I think that concept of, like, the human spirit, like, it's hard being a high schooler because cognitively you are developing, you're going from concrete ways of thinking to abstract, and it's really difficult, especially in my classroom when I, like, push kids to go into the abstract. It's really difficult for them. A lot of the times they're like, no, I don't want to think about this. Like, oh, I don't know, I can't, like, you know, a lot of my teaching style is based in, like, dialogics and, like, Socratic, you know, methods of, like, we're gonna talk this through, and, like, when you come up with a premise that doesn't work, I'm gonna point at it and you have to figure out the holes in it and stuff like that. And, like, that's really difficult for a generation that's really been fed screen time their whole life, and just I feel like they've been fed passivity. And again, that's by the adults in their life, the adults that put the screen in their hand and allowed them to be on these channels for hours at a time, or to do this or do that. And every generation, you know, has this sense of entitlement, supposedly. And at a certain point, it was just normal for millennials to expect that they would, at a certain age, have a phone, have social media, have this, have that. Like, you know, but again, that's not their fault. That's the generation that gave it to them.
that's what gives me hope for the next generation, because these kids are being brought up in a society to where their entire baby photo album is on Facebook.
Oh, it's so gross.
And like their mom has a Facebook profile. So I think that maybe in the next generation, maybe not the one that's now, like the one that's right after the millennials, but the one after that is going to have this real like rejection of what's going on now, because I'm hearing more and more people just being able to just like put their phone away. Even when I was working at the college over the summer, 2 summers ago, there was a couple in the class. They were fresh out of a high school, freshmen. They were barely 18. And they were talking to me about how when they spend time with each other, they don't have their phones. And like when they go to concerts, they're not on their phones unless something really crazy happens. But they're not like doing like, just like 2 kids, boy and a girl. Like, you know, it's like, it's still out there. So I'm seeing this like massive rejection. And I think that's probably like going to be like a real juxtaposition of maturity instead of like a coming into a perception, you know, which is what maturity kind of was before, and adopting like your own responsibilities. I think it's possibly not giving into your impulses and your need to feel connected to everybody and trivial information, hence putting your phone down. So I see that in the future, and I definitely think there's hope, you know, but there's hope with us too. Look at how far we've come, you know. I still have a lot of work to do, but I think I've come really far in the past few years, and I bet you feel the same way about yourself, and like we're still like growing and evolving.
Oh yeah, even the past year has been like this huge, you know, learning experience for me, and I think as long as you never think that you're too good to keep learning or to keep growing or to keep maturing, I think that you're, you know, so long as you're never like, no, I'm too, you know, I'm done maturing or whatever. So long as you never get to that headspace, you're probably in a good way.
So there's still always going to be a part of us that, you know, we're still the kid that liked the Wild Thornberrys. We're still the kid that grew up watching the monster movies. You know, we're still the ones who had all of these experiences, and we were cool, calm, and collected, but it led us to what is the moment as of, you know, right now, in the present. And, you know, it really is about being in the present.
Yeah, it's a gift. That's why it's called the present, because it's a gift.
It really is. And if there really is an allegory or a metaphor for anything, the everyday life is pretty much like climbing over a mentally challenged person's shit on the school bus every day. Because think of it this way. It got to the point where
you can't save this.
I recognized it. I didn't even see it as shit anymore. I just saw it as part of my day.
I think maturing is maybe we should look at Ben. Ben is a good example of maturity, because at one point he thought the bus was the enemy and that he would fight the bus. And he did that, and he did. And then one day he realized, I don't need to fight the bus.
Either that, or that's all he, maybe, I don't know, I haven't seen or heard from him in years. I think maybe he's got a wife and kids, but maybe he just, like, that's what he does now. Like, if there's like if the FBI is looking for a bus, they call Ben to track it down, or like
Ben the bus fighter.
And then like they go to Ben's house, and like there's like a real, like, you know, snarky millionaire that's like, hey Ben, I heard that you're the great guy, you know something, I have resources, Ben, how about me and you work together? And he's like, yeah, I'll take care of that bus. And he just like, he sharpens his boomerang, and then he's like the bus hunter, and he's riding a motorcycle, and like he, like, you know, outlaw buses, he's just hunting them down. And that's what he does now. And he has that backstory where every day just like scoring the high score in the Street Fighter 2 bonus stages, beating up the vehicle. So, but if there's anything else that you could you know, put a stamp on with like how you came into maturity, when do you think that was?
I think I had to be really mature once I was about 16, because I had to deal with something in my household that was very sad and big, and a big part of my life, and kind of put me in a caretaker role. Probably 16 or 17. And I really had to take care of not only myself, but members of my family. because something really bad was happening. So probably around then. And I really kind of have been the same person since then. I've learned more since I went to college. Obviously, I have a profession now. But a lot of me feels the same maturity level as I had when I was about 16, 17.
If you would have any advice to perhaps a listener out there who wants to mature or become mature, and or maybe they know somebody who is immature, like what would you say to them?
I would only say that, maturity is it's a natural process, and it has to be done with experience. So you have to not, if you want to quote unquote mature or have your friend be more mature, remember it's their journey, and it's not really our role to say like when they should mature or whatever. But think about all the things you can do to like personally expand yourself, like learning, reading new books, seeing new movies, putting your phone away and taking a walk, doing things that are kind of those like little things we consider abnormal in the 21st century, but really expand you as a human being. Just don't stop learning or growing. I think that's mostly it. And also the concept of don't be worried about when you're going to get there, because it's just going to happen. And don't be worried about it either, because ultimately I think that being mature is I really embrace it, and I really like it because I can be independent. I understand the world more. I expect things more out of the world, and I'm not as frightened of it. So I don't know.
It reminds me of that Ultimate Warrior quote. I don't know if he was the originator of it, but he posted it on Twitter, so that's close enough for me. But he said, "Growing old is mandatory. Growing up is optional."
I think that really gets back to our idea of you can have an immature sense of humor, but be an immature body.
Oh, God, yeah. So I'm still going to go home today on the radio, and I'm going to bastardize one of the hit songs on the radio. And
I'm not going to do that because I'm mature.
Right. You're going to be, yes, this is art. And then you're going to drink your glass of wine.
No. My LaCroix.
Your LaCroix.
My LaCroix. And I'm going to drink my green juice. And I'm going to do my yoga. And I'm going to do my workout because I'm a mature, grown-ass lady.
Yes, you certainly are. I
ate a salad yesterday. I'm sure.
But you know what else you're going to do?
What?
When no one else is looking? You're going to fart so hard.
Oh my god. I actually farted the other day, and my dog turned around and was looked disgusted at me. And I was like, fuck you.
See? Farts are still funny.
Farts will always be funny.
So that's what we got to do. We got to still keep, finding that youthful part of ourselves, but adopting a responsibility that's greater than ourselves.
Exactly. So we hope you liked this episode. I know we shit on social media a lot, but you really can help us out by liking us on Facebook at Coffee and Catastrophe, or following us on Twitter at CCWBG. You can go on our website, obviously, coffeeandcatastrophe.com. We are on Stitcher, CastBox, iTunes, and soon to be YouTube eventually. So you can check us out there. Definitely, let's interact with each other more. If there's anything that we can do with social media, because it's not going away, we can use it for the power of good, because ultimately we do have that humanity. And ideally, we are mature adults and can communicate about things and difficult subjects, or at the very least, shoot fart jokes back and forth.
Oh God, please, let's hear some real crazy stuff.
I'm into it.
Yes, but thank you guys very much, and be good to each other.
Bye.